2 inches, Sister Wu, it's time for us to go back. Otherwise, Master will know that he will get angry again. The white-dressed female named Shi Na walked forward expressionlessly. She didn't even look at Xiao Yan. She grabbed Wu Shaoqi's hand and turned around, preparing to leave. All right, big sister Shi. You two didn't know each other before. Since it is a misunderstanding now, don't be angry. Wu Shaoqi's mind was sharp and she could tell what Shi Na was thinking at a glance. She immediately grinned and pulled Shi Na back. What misunderstanding? He broke into the Chongming Hall's secret realm. Shouldn't he be punished severely? I'll let him leave since it's his first time here, but he still wants to make a move. I've never seen such a shameless person before. Shi Na suddenly turned around when she heard him. She glared at Xiao Yan with her pair of phoenix eyes and angrily said. Xiao Yan laughed bitterly and was just thinking about how to speak when Wu Shaoqi giggled and said, Sister Shi, how many times have I told you? He was like this when he was in the academy. Otherwise, how could he become the strongest person in our academy? Hearing Wu Shaoqi's words, Shi Na lightly snorted and her anger dissipated a lot. Her eyes stared at Xiao Yan as she curled her lips and said, Such a thick-skinned person, no wonder Sister Wu wants you so much. Xiao Yan was stunned and looked at Wu Shaoqi. The latter's face turned slightly red and she hurriedly blinked at him. Xiao Yan's mind was in a daze and did not know what to say. Xiao Yan, come with me to Chongming Hall first. Seeing that Shi Na was no longer angry, Wu Shaoqi smiled and looked at Xiao Yan with eyes full of excitement. Shi Na, who was at the side, frowned slightly and was about to speak but seemed to have thought of something and did not speak again. Chongming Hall? Xiao Yan was stunned for a moment and then looked at Shi Na guiltily. He smiled bitterly and waved his hand as he spoke in a low voice. Miss Shi and I have a misunderstanding. I am afraid that it will not be resolved in a short period of time. Chongming Hall will not be going. The more beautiful a girl was, the more vigilant she had to be. A woman's heart was like a needle in the ocean. A beauty's heart was like a snake's heart. He had just escaped from the deacon sect. He didn't want to complicate things. Even if there was Wu Shaoqi in the middle, he would feel bad if the Chongming Hall were to vent their anger on the latter because of this. I'm not that petty. Sister Wu is right. You really need to go to the Chongming Hall. Before Wu Shaoqi could say anything, Shi Na, who was standing at the side, had already said in a cold voice. Clearly, she had heard Xiao Yan's words. Xiao Yan smiled awkwardly and leaned close to Wu Shaoqi's ear and whispered, What? Is the Chongming Hall related to Flame Lord? That's right. To be more precise, it has something to do with enlightenment. Wu Shaoqi nodded her head lightly. With a flip of her palm, she took out a fiery red jade pendant. On it was engraved a firebird with a long cry. The firebird raised its head towards the sky. The flames around its body were vivid and lifelike, as if it was a real thing. At first glance, it actually looked somewhat similar to the lipid sunbird. Do you still remember this jade pendant? The fiery red jade pendant flashed in front of Xiao Yan's eyes. Xiao Yan pondered for a moment, then nodded. Back in illusory spirit space, Wu Shaoqi had obtained this jade pendant after obtaining Flame Lord's inheritance. At that time, he didn't know what it was used for, but now, it seemed like it had something to do with the Chongming Hall. Enlightenment is Flame Lord's mount, and the other name of enlightenment is reinvention. Wu Shaoqi put away the jade pendant, stared into Xiao Yan's eyes, and said word by word. Chongming Hall? Xiao Yan seemed to have woken up from a dream. Back in Heaven Divine Mountain, when he was refining the 1,000 Leaves Ancient Monarch Fire, the Bodhisattva ancient tree had transformed into the young Flame Lord. The latter had summoned the sacred bird. It was the Chongming bird. At that time, he had never thought that the Chongming bird would actually be connected to the Chongming Hall. This is related to Flame Lord. Halfway through his words, Xiao Yan suddenly realized that he did not know what to say. The Chongming bird had followed Flame Lord before, so its strength must be unfathomable. However, if it wanted to master the Fire Emperor scripture, it seemed like it was going to give up everything. You don't understand, right? Then follow me. When we arrive at the Chongming Hall, someone will naturally tell you. Wu Shaoqi smiled slyly and said in an unquestionable manner. Who? Xiao Yan said subconsciously. In Mingan Divine Domain, other than some people he had met, he did not have any other acquaintances. He, I won't tell you for now, but I will definitely surprise you. Wu Shaoqi shrugged her shoulders and a trace of complacency flashed across her eyes. Okay, let me see who it is. Xiao Yan could not help but have a trace of curiosity and laughed lightly. With his current strength, even if the Chongming Hall wanted to harm him, it would be enough for him to protect himself. At most, he could just send out a four-colored fire lotus. He called out to the Xiao Ao and was about to follow the two girls when Shi Na, who had been silent all this while, suddenly spoke. You and Sister Wu are friends. As long as you follow the rules, the Chongming Hall will naturally treat you with respect. However, let me give you a piece of advice. Don't anger my master. He doesn't have a good temper. After saying that, Shi Na took the lead and flew towards the direction of the Chongming Hall. She was like a graceful dance, stunning everyone. Sister Shi's master is the disciple that is highly regarded by Grandma Shi. He used to be kind to us. Half a year ago, when he went out, he met with an accident. He lost an arm. After escaping from death, his temper became violent, as if he was a different person. Wu Shaoqi sighed lightly and shook her head. There was a trace of sadness in her tone. It is like this. Xiao Yan pursed his lips and nodded lightly. For the monarch cultivation sovereign, as long as the blood essence in its body was abundant, there was a high chance that its limbs would regrow after it broke. However, if its injuries were too severe, it could only accept the fact that its limbs were broken. After all, not everyone cultivated a powerful skill like the yin-yang mysterious technique, and not everyone possessed a situation skill. For a martial artist, the pain of losing an arm was indeed enough to change one's disposition. It was reasonable for one's temper to become violent. Under Wu Shaoqi's lead, Xiao Yan and the Xiao Ao rushed towards the direction of the Chongming Hall unhurriedly. Using this period of time, Xiao Yan also knew what Wu Shaoqi had experienced in the Mingan divine domain over the years. When they left the Yunluo Academy, Wu Shaoqi was merely a monarch emperor level. Although she had the protection of many heavenly weapons given by Elder Wu out of selfishness, she still suffered a lot in order to come to the Mingan divine domain. The people in the outside world had evil intentions, and they had to be on guard at all times. After coming to the Mingan divine domain without any danger, she fell into a state of confusion when faced with a strange world. It was also due to her luck that she found out about the location of the Chongming Hall at an auction, and then rushed to the southernmost place. Because a young master of a big family with a special fetish had his eyes on the delicate and pretty face of a woman disguised as a man, she had no choice but to flee in a sorry state. When she was about to die, she met Shi Na and her master, and from there, she was rescued and came to the Chongming Hall. The martial ant that Wu Shaoqi spoke of saw the fiery red jade pendant in the former's hand. After knowing her background, he treated her as his own and directly accepted her as his personal disciple. In an instant, her position in the Chongming Hall. She was the same generation as Shi Na's master. Speaking of which, Shi Na still wanted to call her martial uncle. But when the two of them saw each other as old friends, they openly addressed each other as sisters. Although Wu Shaoqi said it lightly, Xiao Yan could feel the hardships within. Not only did he feel some self-blame in his heart, if he could come with her, he would not have let her suffer so much. With a change of heart, not only did he feel grateful towards that Grandma Shi, but he also had some doubts in the depths of his heart. A person whom he had never met before treated Wu Shaoqi as his own just because of a jade pendant. It made people doubt him. To the so-called Chongming Hall secret realm, in the southernmost part of the world, it was indeed the place where the fire attribute origin chis were the densest. The Chongming Hall was the giant of the extreme south. This place was far away from the center of the Mingan divine domain. Apart from the rich fire attribute origin chis, the other resources were extremely scarce. Hence, many large factions, who wanted to dominate the Mingan divine domain, did not have the heart to care about this place. This was the reason why the Chongming Hall was able to safely take root here. If they didn't participate in the competition between the other major powers, they would have nothing to worry about. Along the way, Wu Shaoqi gave them a general introduction. Xiao Yan had a deeper understanding of the Chongming Hall. It was located in the southernmost part of the ancient era. It was also a place where the land was vast and abundant. Countless powers were fighting against each other openly and secretly. After the Soul Demon was thrown into chaos, this place naturally became the most important battlefield in the Mingan divine domain. The king of the Soul Demon had personally taken action, and this place instantly turned into a living hell. Millions of floating corpses had turned all the major powers into ashes. After that, the ancient experts attacked, causing the sky to crack and the earth to collapse. In the end, the southernmost part of the land had become millions of miles of red soil, and the continuous mountains had been razed to the ground. After that, time had passed, but this place could no longer restore its former glory. After who knew how many years, the Chongming Hall had risen to power, and had swallowed up many of the major powers in the southernmost part of the land. They had also taken control of the southernmost part of the land. Naturally, many major powers were dissatisfied with the rise of the Chongming Hall. However, after sending out a few experts from their families, they were killed by the Chongming Hall's palace master. These major powers no longer bothered to investigate the Chongming Hall. The latter had been living in the southernmost region since the beginning. They had no intention of interfering in any conflicts between the major powers. However, as Yin-Yang sect fell apart, it allowed the major powers to see the hope of rising, and that was why they were all trying their best to increase the strength of their major powers. For a moment, all the sects in Mingan Divine Domain were fighting openly and secretly. They didn't want to get entangled with the Chongming Hall anymore. I heard from Grandma Shi that when she was young, the experts of the Deacon sect and the Heavenly Gone sect came to the Chongming Hall, wanting to make the Chongming Hall a subordinate sect of the Heavenly Gone sect. At that time, the palace master naturally wouldn't agree to it, but in order to protect the disciples of the Chongming Hall. So, he pretended to agree and brought them to the secret realm. When no one was paying attention, he would use his own blood essence as a catalyst. He alerted the monsters in the secret realm, and the two masters of the Heavenly Sky sect and Deacon sect joined hands. They had suffered a severe injury before forcing the monster to retreat. From now on, they no longer dared to attack the Chongming Hall. However, the palace master died soon after that, and Grandma Shi became the new palace master. Wu Shaoqi's nose wrinkled when she heard Xiao Yan mention the Deacon sect, and she spoke in a soft and gentle voice. Monster? Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan couldn't help but be shocked. He remembered that he had planned to cultivate the vermilion bird technique there. Cold sweat broke out on his back. How terrifying would an existence that could seriously injure the sect masters of the Deacon sect and the Heavenly Gone sect be? As for the reason why these two powers had come here, Xiao Yan thought for a moment and came up with a rough idea. Heavenly Gone sect mainly cultivated Yang attribute origin cheese. The extreme South Earth attribute origin cheese were abundant, so it couldn't be more suitable for them. However, they had actually been tricked by the Chongming Hall's palace master. They really had to blame themselves for this. What monster? After calming himself down, Xiao Yan couldn't help but ask. That place was related to his cultivation of the vermilion bird technique, so he had to find out more about it. If he really couldn't do it, he could only bear with it and find another place. I don't know, but don't be afraid. Every year, the Chongming Hall will strengthen the ceiling formation in the secret realm. As long as the palace master doesn't use his blood essence to open it, it's impossible for it to break free. As if she could sense Xiao Yan's mood, Wu Shaoqi couldn't help but smile. She had never seen it before. This fellow would also have moments of panic. That's good, Xiao Yan called out softly. He heaved a sigh of relief. He couldn't allow this monster to suddenly appear while he was cultivating the vermilion bird technique. Xiao Yan, if you really want to go there, it won't be a problem. After meeting Grandma Shi, I can take you there. Of course. As long as Sister Shi's master doesn't know about it, it's fine. His temper is very bad now. He even dared to contradict Grandma Shi, not like before at all. If you know that an outsider has gone to the mystic realm, I'm afraid even Grandma Shi won't be able to protect you. As she spoke, Wu Shaoqi sighed dejectedly. The kind old man who saved her from danger back then had now completely turned into a stranger. Xiao Yan nodded slightly and felt a trace of sympathy for Shi Na's master. After all, the latter had saved Wu Shaoqi and become the current her. This was also due to bad luck. While they were talking, they had already approached the location of the Chongming Hall. On a huge plain, a small city-like sect stood solemnly. At the center of the city was a dark hall. It was just like a holy bird that was flapping its wings and soaring into the sky. It had an imposing manner and gave people an extremely shocking feeling. This is the Chongming city. Most of the people in the hall were ordinary people. Only a small portion of them are in the Chongming Hall's territory. These people are under the protection of the Chongming Hall. After that, they provide food and accommodation for the Chongming Hall. This can be considered harmonious. Wu Shaoqi smiled. There were also many children in the Chongming Hall who were cultivating. Their strength was low, far from the point where they did not need to eat or drink. And these things came from Zhongming City. With Wu Shaoqi and Shi Na leading the way, they naturally entered the city with ease. The two girls were the two golden flowers of the Chongming Hall and were extremely famous in the entire Zhongming City. Now that they had returned with an unfamiliar man, they instantly attracted everyone's attention. Among them, there were naturally some hostile gazes. To some young men who were full of vigor and vitality, these two girls were undoubtedly goddesses in their dreams. The huge difference in status between them was something they could only look up to. But now, this rarely seen goddess was actually walking intimately with a young man. This instantly ignited the jealousy in many people's hearts. Xiao Yan didn't care about the looks of doubt and anger that were thrown at him from all directions. With his current strength, he wouldn't dare to walk unhindered in the Chongming Hall, but he didn't need to be afraid either. He looked at the huge black palace in front of him, and an ancient and vast qi rushed towards him. It was as if he had experienced the vicissitudes of time, and it had a kind of indescribable feeling. Along the way, Shi Na didn't say a word. Occasionally, she pricked up her ears to listen to the conversation between the two behind her. She had heard a lot about Xiao Yan from Wu Shaoqi. The two of them were in love with each other and there was nothing they couldn't talk about. She could even say a thing or two about many of Xiao Yan's matters. "See, Grandma Shi, your attitude is better. Don't think that just because you have Sister Wu to protect you, you can do whatever you want." From their conversation earlier, Shi Na knew what Xiao Yan had done in the deacon sect. While she was feeling shocked in her heart, she couldn't help but remind him again. "I know." Xiao Yan's head was full of black lines. He was now in Shi Na's heart. Completely an unreasonable guy. After passing through the layers of courtyards, Shi Na was the first to leave to report to her grandmother. Wu Shaoqi, on the other hand, brought Xiao Yan to the place where the Chongming Hall was located. Although it was not as vast and majestic as the Deacon sect, it still possessed a delicate and exquisite charm. The pavilion had 9 melodies in a row, and the silver spring waterfall flowed straight down. Ancient palaces were spread out in all directions. There were only a few disciples of the Chongming Hall. There were less than 100 of them, but their strength was extremely powerful. After passing through a long corridor, the two of them stopped in front of a relatively worn-out ancient hall. The surrounding scenery of the ancient hall was pleasant, like the unique scenery of a small farm courtyard, making one feel relaxed and relaxed. Creak. Wu Shaoqi lightly pushed, and the door of the hall suddenly opened. There was already someone standing in the middle of the hall. 1-inch Grandma Shi, why are you here? Seeing the figure in the middle of the hall, Wu Shaoqi's eyes lit up. Like a bird out of its cage, she happily pounced forward and hugged the former. Like a little girl who was having fun, she did not look like an adult at all. Xiao Yan fixed his eyes and looked over. Only then did he see the so-called Grandma Shi that Wu Shaoqi spoke of. A head of silver hair that was as white as snow was lowered to his ear, showing that the latter was hale and hearty. The old man was wearing a gray robe that was washed somewhat white. He was dressed very simply. His entire body exuded an aura that caused one to feel intimate from head to toe. Looking at his appearance, there was no signs of aging. Madame Shu was half old. Her charm was still there. When she was young, she was probably also a peerless beauty. Little Na told me that you followed her out again. If her master were to find out, she would probably be scolded again. Grandma Shi's eyes were filled with kindness. She touched Wu Shaoqi's black hair and pretended to be angry. If you didn't say it, who would know? Wu Shaoqi giggled and then pulled herself out from Grandma Shi's arms. She pointed at Xiao Yan, who was at the entrance of the hall, and said excitedly, "Grandma Shi, he is the Xiao Yan that I told you about." Seeing Grandma Shi looking at him, Xiao Yan immediately cupped his fist respectfully and bowed to her. "Young Xiao Yan greets Senior." The #1 genius of 4 academies competition in the 4 large courtyard of the Star Domain. "Xiao Yan, I have been wanting to meet you for a long time, but I just can't find an opportunity. It is fate that we are able to meet this time." A trace of a smile flashed across Grandma Shi's eyes, and she said with a smile, 4 academies competition is just a bunch of kids playing around with each other. You're flattering this kid. Xiao Yan grinned when he heard this. To these people, the fight between these young men was nothing more than playing house. You can't say that. The geniuses of the 4 courtyards will grow into giants in the future. In 100 years, they will become the rulers of the star field. You are in the same generation as them. Defeating them means that you are ahead of them in a sense. Grandma Shi shook her head. Her voice was loud and clear, and it slightly shook Xiaoyan's heart. Besides, I have been busy all this time. It has been a long time since the Yunluo Academy returned, but I also know about its achievements in the 4 academies competition. Initially, I thought that if the 4 academies competition fell behind again, I would let little Na go to the Yunluo Academy. Seeing Xiaoyan's gentle gaze, Grandma Shi gently stepped forward and patted Xiaoyan's shoulder, making him wake up from a dream. Return to Yunluo Academy? Xiaoyan opened his mouth and looked at the charming woman in front of him. His mind suddenly rumbled and he subconsciously said, "You are the dean of Yunluo Academy?" Grandma Shi laughed lightly and turned to look at Wu Shaoqi. She said, "She hasn't told you yet. This little thing sincerely wants to see you make a fool of yourself." As she spoke, Grandma Shi looked at Xiaoyan and said, "My surname is Luo. I am Luo of Yunluo Academy. As for the dean, he is my husband. This, you." After confirming his thoughts, the expression on Xiaoyan's face became rich. It took him a long time to react. He looked at Wu Shaoqi, who was laughing secretly, and suddenly realized why the woman in front of him was so good to Wu Shaoqi. Seeing Xiaoyan's colorful expression, Wu Shaoqi could not help but feel happy in her heart. When she first knew the identity of the old woman, she was not less surprised than Xiaoyan, but it was not easy to see this person shocked. "Follow me. I have a lot of questions to ask you." When Xiaoyan gradually calmed down, Grandma Shi nodded and walked towards the depths of the hall. Seeing this, Xiaoyan also followed without hesitation. Wu Shaoqi tactfully didn't follow him. Her beautiful eyes turned and went to find Shi Na. Black Nether Emperor was possessed by the Soul Demon, which almost destroyed the Yunluo Academy. This is also our fault. Lao Yuan alone is too busy dealing with the trivial matters of the capital of chaos. After passing through the main hall, there was a series of fake hills behind them. The pavilions were situated within. The small bridge and flowing water were extremely beautiful. The two of them were walking on the stone bridge, and Grandma Shi sighed softly. Heaven-surmounting monarch and profound emperor were in secluded cultivation when we left, and didn't ask them to help us. I heard from Wu Shaoqi that you also contributed a lot in that war. Grandma Shi stopped and looked at Xiaoyan with a smile in her eyes. This kid is a student of Yunluo Academy. There is no reason for him to stand idly by. Xiaoyan said softly. The former's approachable temperament made him feel warm. It's all thanks to you. It's not a bad thing to give you the arts of synchronization of the Star Lord. Grandma Shi nodded her head. She had a good impression of Xiaoyan's humbleness. Xiaoyan's smile froze, then he could not help but laugh bitterly. Even the arts of synchronization knew what Wu Shaoqi had said. I heard from Little Na that you came here to borrow the fire attribute Origin Qi to cultivate. In another month, the Chongming Hall will be going to the secret realm to strengthen the seal on the demon. Before that, if you want to go, let Little Na bring you there. Wu Shaoqi has a carefree personality. If Little Na's master finds out about this, he will definitely not allow you to go. After sorting out her thoughts, Grandma Shi spoke again. Her words delighted Xiaoyan. Thank you, Senior, but what exactly is that monster? Unable to suppress the curiosity in his heart, Xiaoyan couldn't help but speak. Do you know the origin of the Chongming Hall? Sighing, Grandma Shi didn't answer Xiaoyan's question. Instead, she changed the topic. I know a little about it, Xiaoyan said vaguely. Although the Chongming Hall was considered a giant in the southernmost region, it could not be ranked in the entire Mingan divine domain. His understanding of it was also very limited. I have the bloodline of the heavy bright bird in my body. This Chongming Hall was created by my ancestors to find Flame Lord's successor. Grandma Shi's voice was calm, but what she said shocked Xiaoyan. Then Wu Shaoqi. That's right. Wu Shaoqi is the descendant of Flame Lord. When the Soul Demon was wreaking havoc, Flame Lord was at the end of his peak. He fought with the Soul Demon King in the southernmost region and forced him to retreat with his heavily injured body. After that, he entrusted all of his good fortune to the heavy bright bird, and no one knew where he was. The heavy bright bird was also seriously injured and died in the southernmost region. Only then did the earth-attributed Origin Qis in the southernmost land begin to become rich. The descendants of the Chongming bird established the Chongming Hall. As she spoke, Grandma Shi raised her head and sighed softly, speaking of which, I am still the granddaughter of the Chongming bird. After I transformed into a human form, I met my husband. The two of us established the Yunluo Academy in the star domain. It has been thousands of years, time really flies. Xiao Yan's face was filled with shock. His heart was beating continuously. He did not expect this. The origin of the Chongming Hall actually had such a story. That monster is a taboo of our ancestors. We didn't say anything about it, but just told us to be careful. After so many years, I should be able to guess. The one sealed inside the mystic realm is most likely the Soul Demon Clan's king. Quote, 2 inches king of the Soul Demon Clan. Hearing these words, Xiao Yan couldn't help but feel his scalp tingle. He knew what these words meant. His heart seemed to be in great turmoil. It was only after a moment that he calmed down. Is it the Flame Master who is sealed here? Xiao Yan swallowed a mouthful of saliva. He found it hard to believe. If Wang Zhen of the Soul Demon Clan was suppressed here, why hadn't Shen Shuihui mentioned it before? With the means of bright divine domain, it would be very easy for them to discover this place. No, Flame Lord only forced him to retreat. Besides, this is only my guess. How powerful must one be to be able to seal the king of the Soul Demon Clan? If my guess is correct, I'm afraid that the Chongming Hall will face a catastrophe. I hope my guess is wrong. A catastrophe? Why? Xiao Yan was stunned. He still hadn't recovered from the shock of the news. He couldn't help but ask. Although I'm not in Yunluo Academy, I know what happened in Capital of Chaos. If there really is a Soul Demon King sealed here, who knows what kind of insane things those awakened Soul Demon would do in order to save it. Sighing, Grandma Shi had a complicated expression on her face. He had been holding these things in his heart for a long time, and had never told his disciple about them. Now that he was facing Xiao Yan, he was able to speak them out with all his heart. Fortunately, that monster's aura has become weaker and weaker over the years. Regardless of whether it's the Soul Demon King or not, this is good news. After a month, we'll strengthen the seal, and perhaps, we'll be able to completely trap him there. After saying this, Grandma Shi heaved a sigh of relief as if she had just released a heavy burden from her shoulders, and her eyes revealed a trace of relief. That's good. Xiao Yan nodded quietly when he heard this. However, he had a faint doubt in his heart. If it was really the king of the Soul Demon Clan, could a grand sealing formation really trap him? Palace Chief, I heard that an outsider has trespassed into the Chongming Hall's secret realm. Is this true? While his mind was in a mess, a deep voice suddenly sounded. In the next moment, a person turned around from the corridor in front of them. A middle-aged man with slightly white hair strode over. The left sleeve of the middle-aged man was empty. Clearly, he had lost an arm. Mi Ning? Grandma Shi lifted her eyebrows when she saw the middle-aged man. She intentionally or unintentionally protected Xiao Yan behind her and said, Xiao Yan is not an outsider. He is a student of Yunluo Academy, which means he is also my student. Xiao Yan focused his eyes and looked at the middle-aged man. The man had a dignified face, and his aura was awe-inspiring. As he walked, his back was straight, and his long hair was draped behind his shoulders. His hair was mixed with some white hair, and he looked quite heroic. He must have been an elegant young master when he was young. The Yunluo Academy is far away in the star field. The palace master hasn't returned for many years. Who knows what will happen on the way here? The middle-aged man called Mi Ning stood in front of Grandma Shi. He looked at Xiao Yan with killing intent in his eyes. Palace master, leave him to me. I will investigate this matter thoroughly. Investigate what? Grandma Shi shook her head helplessly and said softly, You have nothing to worry about when I am here. Your arm, I feel very uncomfortable and helpless. But Mi Ning, you cannot be depressed because of this. Your personality has changed too much. I am shocked when I see it. Palace Lord, you are worrying too much. I'm in a very calm mood right now. As for my personality, I feel that it's very good to be like this now. The corner of Mi Ning's mouth curled up slightly, revealing an emotionless smile. He stared at Xiao Yan for a long time before saying in a cold voice, The monster will be sealed in a month's time. During this period of time, I hope you won't shield him. If you do anything that will harm the Chongming Hall, don't blame me for killing you. After saying that, Mi Ning turned around and left. He didn't have a good expression on his master's face. Xiao Yan, don't blame him. Losing an arm is too much of a blow to him. What he did was for the sake of the Chongming Hall. Seeing Mi Ning leave, Grandma Shi smiled bitterly, turned around and said to Xiao Yan, "Don't worry, Xiao Yan knows about it." Xiao Yan laughed lightly. From Wu Xiaoqi, he knew Mi Ning's strange personality, so it was not too sudden. "That's good. You can stay here for the next few days. In a few days, Mi Ning will go into seclusion. At that time, I will let little Na bring you to the secret realm to cultivate." Lowering her voice, Grandma Shi reminded him in a low voice. Currently, Mi Ning didn't allow anyone to go to the Chongming Hall's secret realm. As the palace master, it was not easy for her to remove this rule. If it wasn't for the fact that he had something to do, he would be the one who went to capture Xiao Yan. "Thank you." Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan hurriedly nodded his head. It would be great if he could cultivate in the Chongming Hall's secret realm again. Behind the Chongming Hall, in an elegant pavilion, Xiao Yan lay quietly on a comfortable bed. Through the window, he gazed at the clear blue sky and did not speak for a long time. That Mi Ning might be Shi Na's master. Wu Xiaoqi was right. This old man's temper was too violent. Especially that look, it makes people unhappy. The Xiao's voice resounded in his mind, filled with indignation. One of his arms was broken. To a genius like him, his future was practically ruined. It wasn't strange for him to become like this. Xiao Yan closed his eyes and said softly in his heart. He had learned a lot about Mi Ning from Wu Xiaoqi. As the most outstanding disciple of his grandmother, her talent was close to demon. In just a few decades, he had advanced to the monarch cultivation with unstoppable momentum. If he was given enough time. But now, everything was gone. TCH, he still has the nerve to call himself a genius? He has lost an arm and is already like this. He doesn't have any disposition at all. In my opinion, he is even worse than Zhu Tianwo. The Xiao snorted in disdain and said to itself, "Humans are different from humans after all." Xiao Yan also felt helpless. He was silent for a long time, but he could only say this sentence. Dong! With a heavy sound, a dark red medicine cauldron appeared in front of him. On the wall of the cauldron, there were 9 lifelike fire dragons carved. The dragon scales on the fire dragon's body flashed with a bone-chilling dark light. The dark red dragon eyes reflected the sunlight. It was as if there were clusters of flames burning gently. The other parts of the medicine cauldron. There were faint traces left behind by the erosion of time, adding a bit of vicissitude and ancientness. The atmosphere was majestic, as if it could devour everything. The 9 dragons flame cauldron, the 5-day cauldron, was Yi Qianqian's famous item. After so many years, this was the first time Xiao Yan had taken it out. Even after so long, the medicine cauldron was still filled with a majestic atmosphere. In order to refine medicine pills above the 6th grade, one had to use heaven cauldrons. After coming out of the Yunluo Academy, how long had it been since he had seriously refined a medicine pill? Most of the time, he would use his hands to refine medicine cauldrons. When he was teaching Sung Rui in the medicine city, he had never used a heaven cauldron before. Although that kid had an excellent bone structure, he used ordinary medicine cauldrons. It was enough. I still need some time to cultivate the vermilion bird technique. This is perfect. I can use this opportunity to understand the yin-yang technique. I can't let profound Emperor's gift go to waste. Sitting in front of the 9 dragons flame cauldron, Xiao Yan let out a light breath. His palms swept across the area in front of him. Nearly 100 herbs were laid out in front of him. All of them were precious items that were rarely seen in the outside world. They were picked from the Heaven Divine Mountain. The yin-yang profound transformation pill originated from an extremely rare medicine pill that was recorded in Elder Yi's vast and ocean-like medicine pill records. It could allow one to better master the yin-yang origin qi within one's body, and its grade was at the peak of the 7th grade. 0 in the quiet room, Xiao Yan closed his eyes and adjusted his breathing. The 9 dragons flame cauldron in front of him seemed to have a life of its own, and it gradually connected with Xiao Yan's aura. The latter's soul surged out from between his eyebrows, and communicated with the 9 dragons flame cauldron, reaching a perfect state. Swoosh! Xiao Yan slowly opened his eyes and moved his palm. A wisp of 4-colored flame appeared out of thin air and entered the 9 dragons flame cauldron. The medicine cauldron was swallowed by the flame, but after a moment, the 9 fire dragons on the surface of the cauldron seemed to have woken up. A bright light emerged in the dragons' eyes. They danced in the room, and then poured into the medicine cauldron. In an instant, a tremendous power surged out from the 9 dragons' flame cauldron in front of him. This was an extremely vast aura, and it was different from all the Xiaoyans that Xiaoyan had seen before. It was as if he was facing an equally powerful expert. What? Boom! Xiaoyan's expression hardened. The aura around his body surged. It was just like a sharp sword gathering at a spot as it violently smashed down towards the 9 dragons' flame cauldron. It instantly scattered the powerful aura that the latter had agglomerated. Spiritual strength poured down and completely wrapped around this medicine cauldron. A low and deep shaking sound was emitted from within the medicine cauldron after a moment. The cauldron had already completely absorbed Xiaoyan's soul. A cluster of 4-colored flame was divided into 9 portions. It slowly burned within the cauldron and spread to every corner of the cauldron. 4 Zichuo Yin, 2 snow heart lotus seeds. Xiaoyan muttered something under his breath as he waved his 10 fingers continuously. One by one, the medicinal herbs seemed to be grabbed by a pair of invisible hands as they flew into the medicine cauldron. After that, they were swallowed by the fire dragon. Under the control of Xiaoyan's soul force, after experiencing different degrees of heat and time, they finally turned into drops of pure medicinal liquid. Very soon, the medicinal fragrance filled the air. It spread throughout the entire room. The medicinal ingredients needed to refine the yin-yang profound transformation pill were extremely complicated. This was also the first time that Xiaoyan had refined a Tier 7 medicine pill. After a short period of time, he swiftly became familiar with it. Although it was a Tier 7 medicine pill, it was as easy as lifting a finger under the powerful spiritual strength. The precise control of the flame, the precise control of the spiritual strength, and the high concentration of one's mental strength, all of these displayed the perfection of the refinement this time around. Xiaoyan was even more fond of Xiaoyan's. Compared to ordinary medicine cauldrons, this heaven cauldron undoubtedly had an extremely beneficial effect on pill refinement. What a good thing! Xiaoyan sighed in his heart. His eyes lit up. The flame and the medicine cauldron. He had the best things that these 2 alchemists craved the most. The 5-day cauldron. I really don't know how powerful the legendary 9 heavens cauldron is. Xiaoyan whispered to himself. Elder Yi had mentioned before that according to the legend, the 9 heavens cauldron could increase the success rate by 30%, but now that he thought about it, it wasn't as simple as it seemed. Apart from refining the Xiaoyans, Xiaoyan also had other thoughts about these things. With the monarch flame, the spiritual strength of a peak illusionary spirit, and the 9 dragons flame cauldron, the success rate of refining a Tier 7 medicine pill was almost 100%. The only drawback was that it took too much time. The 5-day cauldron is already a good thing. At that time, the old fellow had stayed in middle domain for nearly 500 years in order to obtain this thing. Only then did he luckily obtain it. The mocking voice of the Xiaoao was heard, and it mercilessly shook off Yu Tianqian's background. Teacher also had such a tragic experience? Hearing this, Xiaoyan could not help but grin. In front of him, even if his body and spirit were destroyed, his teacher would still lower his head. Xiaoao, how long have you been following teacher? Thinking of this, Xiaoyan pursed his lips and suddenly opened his mouth. He had wanted to ask this question for a long time. When he was still a heavenly sovereign, I followed him. About a few thousand years. Hearing this, the Xiaoao fell silent. After a moment, he spoke with a melancholy tone. Although he usually disdained Yi Tianqian, now that he had gradually recovered his memories, he had a deep longing for this old fellow. Of course, after his rebirth, he had long forgotten about the feelings he had for his past life. However, the things that happened during the time he was with Yi Tianqian were filled with memories. Then, how did you 2 meet? As soon as the topic was brought up, Xiaoyan could not help but ask. His strength had increased greatly, and the memory of the Xiaoao had gradually recovered. He had to revive Elder Yi, and he had to fight with the person who killed his teacher in the future. Therefore, he had to understand the origin of the Xiaoao. The Xiaoao was silent for a long time after appearing to have understood Xiaoyan's thoughts. Finally, it slowly opened its mouth to speak. There was a trace of pressure in its voice. I have told you before that within my body. I have the bloodline of the Azure Dragon. That's right, that's not right either. My father has the purest bloodline of the Azure Dragon. But I am the son of him and a woman from another race. You know the nature of dragons. The bloodline will not be rejected, but for some reason. I was born with a weak constitution, and many of the secret techniques of the Azure Dragon clan were unable to be cultivated. That was why I was expelled from the clan when I was young, and the Azure Dragon clan had many experts. There were countless descendants, and even though I could be considered the Azure Dragon clan's little prince, however, this identity is completely useless, and my father doesn't care at all. After that, by chance, I met Yi Tianchen. At first, he was envious of my sacred core. I wanted him to refine the medicine pill for me, so we made use of each other. Later on, after experiencing all sorts of tribulations and having feelings for each other, it became a relationship that you knew about. So that's how it is. After listening to the Xiaoao's words, Xiao Yan took a deep breath. He never thought that the Xiaoao's background would be so bumpy. It was hard for him to imagine it. Then do you want to go back? After a moment of silence, Xiao Yan suddenly opened his mouth. He didn't know why he would say this. Go back? I don't even know which branch of the Azure Dragon I belong to. The great world is boundless, and no one knows where it is. Besides, I don't want to go back either. The Xiaoao's tone suddenly became serious, and there was no room for doubt. Upon hearing this, Xiao Yan gently nodded his head and didn't say anything else. His heart was filled with complex emotions. The Xiaoao had long recovered its memories, but it had always hidden these memories deep in its heart. If he did not ask, perhaps he would not have said it out loud. It was that lively and cute little fellow. However, in his heart, he also had such a terrible past that he could not bear to look back on. Let's not talk about this anymore. Once you have successfully cultivated the Vermilion Bird technique, the Four Spirit Emperor technique will merge into one, and the power will definitely increase greatly. After that, it will be the last few forms of the four techniques. If you have enough opportunities, perhaps in the future, you will master four saint techniques. Ha ha ha, even stronger than that old fellow. After hearing the Xiaoao's words, Xiao Yan could not help but laugh bitterly. The last few forms of the Four Spirit Emperor technique were difficult to cultivate, but in order to comprehend it, one had to absorb the blood essence of a stronger holy beast. If one really wanted to master a saint technique, one would need to absorb the blood essence of a true saint holy beast. No, there are more than four types of it. There's also the yin-yang technique. The final power of this thing is definitely not weaker than a saint technique. Xiao Yan, you have to work harder. Don't let my hope fail. The Xiaoao's tone increased a little. There was even a trace of excitement in its tone.